showing up for Wickla's first MCLE program of the year. I was telling Pat Nicholson that I've been in jump classes at St. Ignatius that had more people than have shown up here today. So we should do what we did in jump classes, silent reading. So for the next hour, you guys can just read the cases, and we'll talk about them later. But I'm only kidding about that. I want to make a few announcements before we begin today's program. First of all, today is the first day that we have adopted this kind of new schedule that we're going to use for the rest of the year, which is we're going to try to do these programs on the last Thursday of the month. It seems like that is a day when the fewest status calls and trial calls are taking place, so it'll give members the best opportunity to be here. I think the only exception to that rule is going to be November and December, when it's right around Christmas time and maybe even Thanksgiving, I think, was that last Thursday. But whatever, look at the schedule. It's online. We're going to do two special medical seminars, one in the spring and one in the fall, as we always do. Those dates are yet to be determined. We're going to try and coordinate those with the Workers' Compensation Commission. Judicial training. The other special program that I want to bring to your attention is the Lincoln's Birthday Professional Responsibility Program. So that's going to be on Tuesday, February 12th here in this room. It's going to be a 3-hour professional responsibility program. So it gets your 1-year requirement out of the way. As you know, you have to have 6 hours of professional responsibility in a 2-year period. You'll get all 3 for that first year or second year, depending on when you report here at that program. And it's also going to include the 2 special hours that you need. So it's going to include a program regarding mental health and substance abuse, and an hour regarding diversity and inclusion. So you're going to be able to get the professional responsibility hours you need at that one program. And we've been doing that on Lincoln's birthday for the last few years. The last thing I want to mention is that we are going to try to become a little more paperless this year, if we can. So when we can, we're going to try to post the written materials on the website the night before the program. So if you want to download the materials on your own, or just have them, on your computer and your device or whatever it might be, we're going to try and get a little more paperless this year. So I'm not going to be bringing as many sets of the paper documents as I have in the past, and maybe by the end of the year we'll kind of phase that out altogether. So those are the kind of announcements that I wanted to make, the kind of housekeeping announcements. Any other questions about that? We are certified as an MCLE provider through July 1, so anything we do between now and then is completely certified. We've received the special certification for the 3-hour professional responsibility program that we need, so there are no issues regarding the certifications of these programs, okay? Any questions, any concerns about that? All right, so let's dive into the program for today. So this is called a Case Law Updated Commission Decision Review. So first of all, what we're going to do is talk about 2 commission decisions, one of which involves the intoxication defense, the other one of which involves a carpal tunnel case that applies Section 8.1b, but also Section 8b(9) of the Act in a way that I think may even be an issue of first impression as far as I'm concerned. And then we'll go back and we'll pick up the appellate court case that I want to talk about, which is the Sheriff Smith case that we've talked about already a lot in this program. The decision came down a couple of weeks ago from the appellate court, so we finally have an answer from the appellate court, and we'll talk about that at the end, just because I want to save enough time to discuss that pretty important case. So I want to skip to the commission decisions first, so that we can kind of breeze through those so we can get to talking about the Sheriff Smith case. The first case I want to talk about is the Jeremy Reynolds versus Multiband case. This slide is not in your written materials, but I just wanted to have it up there while I talk about the facts of the Jeremy Reynolds case so that you could have an idea of what the intoxication defense is while we're talking about the facts and kind of see where the lawyers were going with their prosecution of the case or their defense of the case. So Jeremy Reynolds worked for Multiband. He was a traffic employee. He was given a vehicle that he drove back and forth to different job sites. On the morning in question, when he was injured, he was in the company van driving to a meeting where it was kind of like a scheduling meeting where all of the technicians would show up and then they would be dispatched out to the places they were going. So he's in the company van. He has a one vehicle incident where he claims that the brakes on the van failed. He skids out and goes into a ditch and sustains injuries in that way in the company van. So there's really no question that, our new president, Jim Hardy, has arrived. So Jim, do you have any announcements that you'd like to make before I get any further into the program here?
No, that's fine, Dave. I'd like to thank you for coming today and moving forward with the seminar this morning, and thanks everybody for attending.
So,
appreciate it.
Jim was inducted a couple of weeks or so ago, so let's give Jim a thanks. So there's no question he was in the course of the employment, right? He's driving in the company van, going to a company meeting, so there's no question about that. The problem arises that when he gets to the emergency room, there's a blood test, a routine blood test done in the emergency room, and it's discovered that he has marijuana in his system, right? So, and the case is in your written materials, but he has initial test level of 50 nanograms per milliliter. I have no idea what that means, right? Because I never inhaled and I smoked. In any event, the blood test comes back positive for marijuana in his system. Right? On the basis of that positive test, the arbitrator denies benefits to Mr. Reynolds in this case. The arbitrator finds that the petitioner's claim is barred by Section 11 of the Act, and why does he do that? Well, you can see what Section 11 of the Act talks about, right? It says, no compensation is payable if the intoxication is the proximate cause of the injuries, right? Or if intoxication constituted a departure from the employment. So the focus here is on this first part, right? Intoxication being the proximate cause of the injuries in Mr. Reynolds' case. Right? Admissible evidence, that positive marijuana test is admissible evidence in the case to determine whether the employee was intoxicated, and it shall be considered. So the arbitrator is doing what he's instructed by the Act to do. He must consider that, and he's doing that. All right? You can look here, though, that there's a presumption that the intoxication that the employee is intoxicated and that the intoxication is the proximate cause of the injury if one of two things is present, right? A positive blood alcohol test, right? So intoxication by by alcohol is presumed if there is a positive test, right? But look at what the Act says about when the intoxication is caused by a drug, specifically marijuana, right, cannabis. It says that the presumption of intoxication and proximate cause arises if there is evidence of impairment, right? So this distinction between a positive test in the case of alcohol and evidence of impairment in the case of marijuana becomes important in Mr. Reynolds' case in front of the commission, as you'll see. And it talks about how the employee can overcome the presumption by showing that the intoxication was not the only sole proximate cause of the injury, right? So as we all know from law school, right, an injury can have many proximate causes, right? There can be multiple proximate causes for an injury. If the employee is able to show that the injury has more than one proximate cause, there might be a reason then for the presumption to be rebutted. Okay? So in this particular case, the arbitrator found that the claim was barred by Section 11, by this particular part of Section 11 that deals with intoxication defense. And the arbitrator said that the reason why it was barred was because that presumption arose because there was a positive marijuana test. Okay? The petitioner, Jeremy Reynolds, said, look, the test may have been positive, right, but I wasn't intoxicated by marijuana. It was because I had been exposed to secondhand smoke of marijuana. And he went so far as to say, and by the way, I was exposed to secondhand smoke when I was doing my job, right? Because I think this company is a cable installation company, right? So he said, when I go to, these stoners' houses to install their great, cables so that they can play their games or whatever they're doing, right? He said, I was exposed to secondhand smoke all the time, right? Well, the arbitrator didn't buy it, right? The arbitrator didn't buy that excuse and said, look, I suppose it really doesn't much matter. You came up positive anyway, and I don't believe that it was due to secondhand smoke, right? And the arbitrator found that the petitioner's testimony that the accident was caused by the failure of the vehicle's brake system is also questionable, right? Why was the petitioner even trying to prove that, right? Why was the petitioner trying to prove that it was the failure of the brakes, right? He was trying to prove that the intoxication was not the sole proximate cause, right? That there was another proximate cause, the failure of brakes. Yeah, I was high as a kite, so what? The brakes failed, right? So that was kind of this argument. Yeah, right. Are you questioning that? I'm sorry. Mark? Oh, you were trying to?
He was trying to overcome the presumption.
Right. By using that second, that part that says it doesn't, if you can prove that it's not the sole proximate cause, right, you can overcome the presumption, even if you were high, right? Even if you were high, if it's not the sole proximate cause, you can overcome the presumption. Well, the respondent rebutted that, right, by having a couple of experts testify that they examined the van after the accident, and the brakes were in perfectly working order, right? The brakes, there were no problems with the brakes. So on that basis, right, the fact that he was intoxicated because he came up positive, right, and because he could have proved that there was some other proximate cause, the arbitrator found that Section 11 intoxication defense barred his claim for benefits, right? So the commission affirms and adopts the decision of the arbitrator, the denial of the benefits, on a 2-to-1 decision. So why are we even talking about the commission decision, right? Well, the reason why I'm talking about the commission decision is because the dissent in the commission decision, I think, is really interesting, because it points out some of those things that we already looked at in Section 11, right? So first of all, what the dissent talks about is the credibility of Mr. Reynolds, right? The dissent says, look, credibility findings by the commission and by arbitrators cannot be arbitrary, right? They have to be based on something. And what the dissenting commissioner says is that since there was no evidence really one way or another how this marijuana got into the petitioner's system, right, that the lack of the finding that he was intoxicated is not the same thing as saying that he was not credible when he said that he was exposed to secondhand smoke, okay? So there's some really good language in the dissent about this idea about how the arbitrators and commission can make credibility determinations and how they can't be arbitrary, okay? And that's because the petitioner was never questioned about the specifics of the exposure, right? He said, on direct, he said, yeah, I had a positive test because I was exposed to secondhand smoke, right? But there were never, on cross-examination, there were never any questions about the specifics, right? When was the last time you were exposed to secondhand smoke? How much smoke was there in the room when you were exposed to secondhand smoke that last time, right? So the dissenting commissioner says, look, because there aren't specifics about that, that's the same thing, that's not the same thing as finding that the petitioner is not credible when he makes that assertion. Yeah, did you have a question, John?
Yeah, it also appears to be an issue of evidence. I mean, he tested positive 15 nanograms per milliliter, but we don't know what that is. We don't know, is that an intoxication level, how much marijuana is in his blood?
So John brings up a good point, right? So what does it mean to have a positive test for 50 nanograms per milliliter, right? What does that mean, right? And by the way, I'm not so sure that so what's it now?
Like, if he tests positive, isn't it up to him to rebut to show that that intoxication?
Well, I may be wrong, but when I'm reading section 11, when I'm reading section 11, there's a distinction, and the dissenting commissioner makes that distinction, right? When it comes to alcohol, the presumption of intoxication, approximate cause, arises solely from the positive test, right? But when it comes to things like marijuana and illegal drugs, the presumption arises through evidence of impairment, right?
Is there a decision to that effect? Because I've never heard that,
Well,
that
so-
specific
So, well, I think it says it right in the act, right? Because if you look,
But it doesn't say, it says blood alcohol level. I don't think they're meaning that the blood alcohol is just, the blood is simply for the alcohol. It's a blood test.
Got it.
But
It's
it
a
says
breathalyzer. What if it's a breathalyzer? I mean, it doesn't count.
it says alcohol, though,
It
right? It
says
says-
blood alcohol.
Right, right. But how is a marijuana test testing for blood alcohol?
You know what?
Right.
That's got the same meaning as this dissent that talks about unlawful or unauthorized use. It doesn't matter. Unlawful use of alcohol is legal. People can drink alcohol. It's not illegal to drink alcohol, but if you've got it in your system during a work injury, it's got the same effect. So this whole business about being unlawful or unauthorized use, I think is a red herring. He's got marijuana in his system. Now you, as a petitioner, have got the burden of proving that that presence played a minimal, if any, role in the accident. And that's what it sounds like he failed to do.
So that's a really strong argument. So I agree with your argument, but I would suggest that there's a contrary argument, right? Because the word "or" is there, right? It says, if at the time of the accidental injury, there was 0.08 or more by weight of alcohol in the employee's blood, breath, or urine, or, right, if there is any evidence of impairment due to the unlawful or unauthorized use of one, cannabis, two other kinds, 3, 4 other kinds of illegal drugs. All right, and that's the distinction that the dissenting commissioner is making, right? If you look at the dissenting commissioner, the distinction that she's making is that just showing that somebody has a positive marijuana test is not the same thing as showing that they are impaired, right? Right? So it's certainly evidence of impairment, right? It's evidence of impairment, but as she says, a positive test result does not presuppose impairment, right?
Dave, can you also acknowledge that in the case of alcohol, I mean, the marijuana intoxication is a relatively new thing, and they're only now coming up with breathalyzer tests for marijuana. But for alcohol, it is, everybody knows what the medically determined impairment level is for alcohol, which is why you have a specific amount listed there and no specific amount for the marijuana.
Steve, exactly right. Exactly right. That's why the legislature made this distinction, right? Because we know that 0.08 blood alcohol impairs you, right? We don't know what impairs you when it comes to those other things, right? The levels of marijuana, right? That's why some people suggest, including myself, that the legislature made this distinction, right? That for alcohol, yeah, we know it's 0.08. That's why it's in there, right? for marijuana and other drugs, we don't really know what it is, right? You're right, the science is developing. We don't really know what it is, so that's why you have to prove evidence of impairment as opposed to just proving the test. Is the test part of evidence of impairment? Sure it is, right? But it doesn't, as the commissioner, the dissenting commissioner anyway, in this case says, presuppose impairment, right? In any event, that's the dissent. The dissent never gets around to this idea of the failure of the brakes, was that the sole proximate cause or one of the proximate causes, because the dissenting commissioner says, look, I don't believe that there was evidence of impairment in this case, right? There was certainly evidence of a positive test. In fact, the dissenting commissioner says if you look at the emergency room where that petitioner actually had the marijuana test, the emergency room says he was oriented, like they always do, right? Alert, oriented, there's an acronym for AO something, right? Alert and oriented. So the dissenting commissioner says, I don't think there is contrary evidence to him being impaired, right? He was alert and oriented in the emergency room. Yes?
What about the fact you don't ban off that's something they consider?
Well, I don't think so, right? Because, the fact that it was a one-car accident and he drove the van off the road, right, does that make it less arising out of or something? Well, okay, so there's the argument, right? So there's the argument. Did the arbitrator get it right, even though the arbitrator didn't mention that evidence, right? Didn't mention that finding. I believe the fact that he drove the van off the road is evidence of impairment, and I find that there is sufficient evidence of impairment here to create the presumption, right? That's not what the arbitrator did. He said, positive test equals presumption. And all that the dissenting commissioner is saying is, positive test in the case of marijuana doesn't necessarily equal the presumption. Maybe you need more than that to get the presumption in a marijuana case.
But
Right? Go ahead.
Isn't that going back to the old act before the amendment then to some extent, that the respondent has to prove impairment?
Well, sure, but
Is that what the legislature intended though?
well, at least regarding the drugs, I think I can tell you that yes, that there was some intent to make a distinction between alcohol and drugs, right? Just because this idea about, for example, one of the things about marijuana, so I hear, right, is that it can stay in your system for a long time, right? So you can have 50 nanograms of marijuana in your system for 30 days, even though you haven't smoked, right? They can test your hair for marijuana, right? And it comes up positive 30 days later, right? You're not impaired.
What about an opiate? Is there a distinction between marijuana and opiates?
Well,
in your bloodstream?
So I think that perhaps that would be something that a respondent would want to put into evidence, right? That a certain level of opiates in your system indicates that you are impaired, right? Right? So in other words, I think what the dissenting commissioner is pointing out is be careful on both sides, right? Petitioner and respondent, right? Don't just, as she says, presuppose that a positive marijuana test equals impairment, because it might not. Okay? So I don't know, maybe that's splitting hairs, but I think it's important because of what you're saying, Steve, right? That did the legislature create this distinction or didn't it? I think it did, and you think it doesn't. So
Kevin, should we assume the new administration is going to take care of it? That's just a joke.
okay, all right, thanks. So I'll give my joke answer.
What's the status of the appeal on this case?
As far as I know, there was no circuit court review filed on this case. As far as I can tell from the website. Yes.
Let's just say that the petitioner smelled like marijuana, okay, after the accident. There was no test of it. There's still evidence of impairment, right? So if the arbitrator laid it out, I think that there's an accident and there's the odor of marijuana, and that gives me the evidence of impairment. That could be enough. In other words, the test itself really, the
all I'm saying is that on both sides, you may want to present more evidence of impairment when it's marijuana or a drug than just relying on a positive test to say, and therefore impairment, right? I suppose you can make that argument. In fact, in this case, the respondent made that argument in one, right?
Aren't all we're really arguing about or discussing is who has to prove that impairment or lack thereof. The respondents get to sit back and say, you know what? The preponderance is now on you to show that the marijuana played no role in the accident. I was working for 8 hours that day. I had no problem. I've been doing my job without any difficulty, and then this accident happened.
Sure.
No, Steve, I disagree with that. I think that you first have to get over that first hurdle. You have to show that there was some sort of evidence of impairment.
I
If there
understand
is,
what you're
then
saying.
that comes
I
in.
understand what you're saying, but at the same time, if there's evidence, even so little as if there was the police noted the odor of marijuana in the police report, okay? So there's the evidence that marijuana was involved in this case. Now all we're doing is shifting the burden to the petitioner to say, whether there's marijuana or not, yeah, I had secondhand smoke, yeah, I smoked a week ago, yeah, you know, last night, whatever, but I wasn't impaired, and this is why.
And so, and I think that's the change maybe that the legislature made when they put in section 11, right? Because before, you had to prove that the guy was so completely stoned out of his mind that the second part of section 11, right, that the intoxication constituted a departure from his employment. He was so stoned out of his mind that he couldn't even drive the van anymore. You know, right? So there's what the legislature gave to new respondents, right? If you can prove evidence of impairment, you get this presumption of two things, right? The intoxication and that the intoxication was the proximate cause of the injury, right? You get two, you know, a 1-2 punch, right? So maybe that's what the legislature was changing when they put this presumption, all right? Okay, so moving on real quickly to the next part, or next commission case, so we can get to the Sheriff Smith case, is the Stephen Ferris versus Northwestern University case. Actually, somebody in this room might have been a lawyer in this case. Yes, no? Okay. In any event, this case is significant for, I think, a lot of different reasons. Okay. First of all, it was tried as a 19B8A petition, but the parties agreed that in the alternative, if the arbitrator were to find that the prospective medical treatment that the petitioner was wanting to get was not awarded, right, was not necessary, right, that the arbitrator could then find on the permanency. So I don't know if any of you have ever done that before, right? Were you done? Have you done those cases in the alternative, a 19B8A? Okay, all right. I suppose I've been so confident in my 19B8As that I've never actually agreed to do it in the alternative. But and I've lost my, I got my head knocked off with that too a lot of times. So, but the fact of the matter is that it's interesting to me, at least for that reason, right? That you can pursue it as a 19B8A. But if that doesn't work out, you can allow the arbitrator to make findings on permanency if your opponent agrees to that. Right? It's an interesting application of Section 8.1b, right, which are the 5 factors that we talk about so often here. And then the last thing I think that's important here is that, as far as I can tell, and you guys tell me if you've had cases like this, it's the first application of Section 8E9 of the Act, which allows for an award for a repetitive trauma carpal tunnel case in excess of 15%, right? Everybody now knows that, right? Since 2011, the Act says that in terms of carpal tunnel, that the cap is 15% unless you can show clear and convincing evidence that it should be more than that, right? In which case, it can be more than 15%. And as far as I know, this is the first case in which there's a finding of more than 15%. Anybody else had a carpal tunnel for more than 15% since 2011? okay, so maybe this is the first case in that regard. So it's important to study for that reason. The other thing that's interesting to me is that this is like the rogues gallery of doctors in this case, you know. So you have Dr. Malik, who does the first set of bilateral carpal tunnel. You know, you've got Dr. Bender, who does the second set of carpal tunnel surgeries. You got Dr. Weidrich as an IME in the case. You got Dr. Weinsweig opining that the petitioner needs a third set of bilateral carpal tunnel surgeries. You got a UR, a utilization review done by Dr. Trotter, right? You've got another IME done by Dr. Fernandez. So I mean, this is like every doctor who's ever done carpal tunnel is involved in this case. So it's interesting for that reason too. So very quickly, let's go through how the arbitrator analyzed the 5 factors to come up with the decision. In this case, there was no impairment rating in the case. So even though Dr. Weidrich said that if he had been called upon to do an AMA impairment rating, he would have given it a 0 because most carpal tunnels end up as a 0 impairment rating. He wasn't really called upon to do an impairment rating, so that's why the arbitrator says there was no impairment rating consistent with the AMA guides, right? Because even though Dr. Weidrich kind of said it could have been a 0, it wasn't in the proper form. So the arbitrator says that the arbitrator gives that factor no weight, right? Obviously, right? Occupation of the injured employee, you can see here that the arbitrator says that it's a repetitive job, it involves intensive use of the hands. As such, the arbitrator gives this factor greater weight, right? So, and you see this repeated in many of the decisions that involve section 8.1b, right? This greater weight, lesser weight, right? A relative term, right? Greater, right? Not great weight, but greater weight. Greater weight than what? Greater weight than the other factors, right? Greater weight than any one of the particular factors. So, but you see this kind of language a lot. Greater weight, lesser weight, as like a relative balancing of the factors, right? Age of the employee. This is an interesting finding here. Take a look at how this one works out, right? He's 46 years old at the time of the injury. This means that the petitioner is now over halfway through his expected work life expectancy, and that he has less years of work ahead of him as compared to other individuals, right? So he's got fewer years of work, and therefore his age, I guess, decreases the permanent partial disability. But interestingly here, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen this in an arbitrator's decision, the arbitrator gives this the appropriate weight. The appropriate weight, right? Not greater weight, lesser weight, the appropriate weight.
What does that mean?
Who says, right? Who says the appropriate weight, right? So in any event, that's an interesting use of the word appropriate there, right? And you can look at the other factors here. Again, you know, these relative types of words, lesser, greater. The loss of earning capacity is an interesting one because look at what it says here. The petitioner has testified that he continued to work full duty in the same position for the respondent and is making the same amount of money. Therefore, it's given lesser weight. We've seen at least one other decision, right, that we studied here that said that this should actually be given greater weight, right? Because if there is no impact on future earning capacity, that means that the PPD should be less, right? Because, right, so that's an interesting kind of contrast to another case that we looked at here, right? On the basis of all of this, the arbitrator finds that the petitioner is entitled to 15% loss of use of each of his hands, right? And here's what the commission says about that. The commission goes through the arbitrator's decision and recounts the 5 factors, doesn't really disagree one way or another with the weight or the relevance that the arbitrator has given to the factors, but then the commission does what I think it has done for the first time in a case, which is to say, look, what section 8E9 of the Workers' Compensation Act has said since the amendments in 2011 is that if there is clear and convincing evidence that it should be more than 15% loss of use of the hand, it can be. And in this case, the commission says, we think that it's more than, that there is clear and convincing evidence that it's more than 15%, and at least on the right dominant hand, they modify the decision up to 20%. So this could be a case of first impression, so it's something important to study. What's significant to the commission to bump it above 15%? Despite 2 rounds of bilateral surgeries to address carpal tunnel, petitioner has consistently reported high pain levels, underwent additional treatment in the form of a right wrist injection by Dr. Bender, other pain management treatment, reportedly received no benefit. He also apparently had some pretty thick scars as a result of the 2 carpal tunnel surgeries that he had on each hand, so that was significant to the commission to bump it up above. So that formed part of the clear and convincing evidence to bump it above 15. Okay? All right. All right, let's any questions about this one? Any comments? Okay, good. So let's go to Sheriff Smith, which is the appellate court case that I want to talk about. So ultimately, it ends up as an unpublished appellate court decision, but I think it's important to talk about because I think it really clarifies some of the aspects of the law that we've kind of been struggling with over the last few months here when we've been talking about the Sheriff Smith case. And furthermore, I have reason to believe that there may be a motion to publish this decision filed or being filed. And so sometimes those motions succeed, and if it succeeds, then of course it will be a published decision. But I think it's important to talk about because I do think it clarifies some of the aspects of the law. So in this case, as you'll recall, because we've talked about it a lot, right, the arbitrator awarded benefits for a slip and fall on snow in the employer's parking lot. The arbitrator found that the parking lot was owned and maintained by the respondent. Therefore, the petitioner was in the course of her employment when she was out on the parking lot, even though it was after, quote unquote work hours. She was going to her car after work. Because it was owned and maintained by the respondent, therefore she's in the course of when she's on the parking lot. The other issue considered by the arbitrator was the arising out of issue, and the arbitrator found that since it was an unnatural accumulation of ice and snow because the respondent had previously plowed and salted that lot, that the petitioner was at a risk greater than the general public, right, because it was an unnatural accumulation of ice and snow, and therefore it arose out of the employment because it was a risk greater than the general public. Okay? So what does that sound like to you when the arbitrator starts saying things like risk greater than the general public, right? We've talked about the 3 different kinds of risks. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I'm just going to remind you, right? Personal risks, never compensable, right? Employment risks, always compensable, right? Neutral risks, sometimes compensable, sometimes not, right? When an arbitrator is talking about risk greater than the general public, which of the 3 categories do you think the arbitrator is talking about? Right? Anybody? Neutral. Okay, neutral risk, right? Because this risk greater, in my opinion anyway, neutral risk, right? That's when you start talking about things like greater than the general public, right? This kind of quantitative or qualitative analysis that we've talked about before, right? Risk greater than the general public. You usually see that kind of language in the neutral risk cases, okay? So, even though I don't think the phrase neutral risk was used in the arbitrator's decision, right? I think that the analysis of the arbitrator was a neutral risk analysis. She found that it was a risk greater than the general public because of the unnatural accumulation of ice and snow, right? And therefore decided that it was, I guess qualitatively different, right? Than the risk that the general public faced, and therefore was arising out. Okay, so what is the commission do? You'll recall, because we talked about it a lot, right? That the commission reverses the compensability here. The commission says that Sheriff Smith is denied workers' compensation benefits, right? Okay. The commission says the mere fact that the duties take the employee to the place of injury and that but for the employment, the employee would not have been there is not sufficient to give rise to the right to compensation, right? So what do we usually call this, right? The positional risk theory, right? So this is the positional risk theory. Just because you're there, right, doesn't mean that it's compensable, right? Okay? But Sheriff Smith wasn't saying it was just because I was there, right? She was saying I was there, but there was snow and ice on the ground, right? It's not just me being there. It's the condition of the employer's premises that was a cause for my slip and fall, right? The commission says that the parking lot is open to the general public, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Walmart case in just a second here. Open to the general public, right? So what does that kind of language remind you of, right? When you hear about open to the general public, the general public could be there, right? Is that in the course of or an arising out of issue, right? Okay, I put down not in the course of here because that's how I do that, right? This idea that the general public can be there, are you in the course of when the general public can be there, right? Some people may see that differently, right? But in any event, the commission says the general public is there. That's one factor that we're going to use to reverse the award of benefits, right? The accumulation of ice and snow in the parking lot represented a natural accumulation, right? So the commission says, look, this is a natural accumulation of ice and snow. Therefore, risk not greater than the general public. Therefore, no arising out, right? So that's how the commission analyzed the case, right? Because it's a natural accumulation of ice and snow, it did not arise out of the petitioner's employment. The circuit court confirmed that decision, and then the case was argued in the appellate court. The decision came down about 3 weeks or so ago, and this is the unpublished Sheriff Smith decision. So, the headline here is that the appellate court reverses the commission's denial of benefits, right, and reinstates the arbitrator's finding that this is a compensable case, all right? But I think did it on a different theory than the way the arbitrator had awarded the benefits, and that's why, you know, if you look at the last line, it says, you know, reversed in part and reinstated in part. I think the part is the analysis, right? That's what's being, in terms of the arbitrator's decision, that's what's being differentiated, okay? So, here's what the commission, or I'm sorry, excuse me, here's what the appellate court says about the Sheriff Smith rules, okay? Even though it never uses the phrase employment risk, right, I think that what the appellate court is telling us is that the hazardous condition of the employer's premises when the employee is in the course of her employment is always an employment risk, okay? The hazardous condition of the employer's premises, right, is always arising out of, right? Because it's the hazardous condition of the employer's premises. It's an employment risk. And what the appellate court tells us is that it doesn't matter if the general public is exposed to that same hazard, right? If it's the employer's premises and the employee is in the course of her employment when she encounters that hazardous condition of the employer's premises, that is an employment risk. And the reason why I think I can say that is because the appellate court says the risk analysis is unnecessary if the injury occurred on the premises due to an unsafe or hazardous condition. All right? So you don't have to get into this idea of risk greater than the general public if it's the hazardous condition of the employer's premises, right? It's an employment risk. That's why you don't have to do that extra analysis. There's some great language from my point of view, as a petitioner's lawyer in this case, which is why I'm hoping that the appellate court will publish the case, because it really clarifies the law. Look at some of these sentences that are in here. The presence of a hazardous condition on the employer's premises that causes a claimant's injury supports the finding of compensable claim, right? The fact that this parking lot was also used by the general public is immaterial to the issue of compensability because the claimant's injury was caused by a hazardous condition on the employer's premises. Two key factors that the appellate court says you have to analyze, right? Did it occur on the employer's premises, right? And was it due to a hazardous condition, right? If it occurred on the employer's premises and it was due to a hazardous condition, analysis is over, right? You don't have to get into this greater than the general public analysis, right? So, yes.
One quick question. Can you recognize, I mean, I don't know how you differentiate between ice and snow and just a rainstorm, okay? And I agree with everything you say when we talk about a defect, but don't we need a hazardous condition of rain and snow? Isn't that hazardous condition not only on the employer's premises, but on the public sidewalk, your own driveway, your own doorstep? So the fact that ice and snow is immediately deemed to be a hazardous condition, that's the employer's responsibility for, I think is a scary situation. And do you think, the other aspect of this is the way the arbitrator pointed it out, and I understand that the appellate court didn't necessarily agree with everything the arbitrator said, was that because it was shoveled, it was not a natural accumulation of ice and snow. And are they saying, you know what, employers, don't shovel a thing. Leave everything, let the snow fall, and let it pile up, and let them assume the risk of coming to work. And isn't that exactly what was rejected by the circuit courts, saying, no, there's a good Samaritan. If you shovel your driveway, you can't be responsible when somebody slips on the ice and snow on the sidewalk or your driveway.
So I'm gonna bite my tongue and let maybe somebody else answer your question.
Steve, I've tried a couple of these in the last year, and the case law has been more, I've focused more on, is it a defect or is it?
Right, and I agree with that. If there's a
So I think
defect,
whether it's shoveled or not shoveled, I think naturally accumulating snow could be a defect. Shoveled snow that is iced over could be a defect. If there's something there
how's that a defect?
that is not the normal
Right.
condition of the circus, then it could be a defect.
So let me disagree with the answer, okay? Because I get where we want to go with this word defect, right? But that's not what the law is, right? The law, and this, look at bullet point number 3 here. This is lifted directly from the decision. And I understand it's an unpublished decision, but it's citing a published case, right? The presence of a hazardous condition, not a defective condition, right? So can something be hazardous and not be defective? Of course it can, right? Of course it can. An ice skating rink is hazardous. Is it defective? Of course not. The Zamboni just made the ice nice and smooth, right? It's not defective, but it's certainly hazardous, right? So the word that the case law uses is hazard, not defect, with all due respect, right? Not because the underlying presumption of the Workers' Compensation Act is this has nothing to do with the employer's responsibility, right? It doesn't have anything to do with the employer being responsible for the hazardous condition, right? It has to do with in the course of and arising out of, right? Now, you want to start introducing those negligence kinds of concepts, right? Defect, right? Knowledge of the defect, right? Like
Dave, don't get me wrong. I'm not disagreeing with anything you say about a defect, or it doesn't have to be a defect. All I'm questioning is whether nature is a hazard.
So that's the question, right? How do you prove that something is hazardous, right? So how do you prove that something is hazardous, right? Well, one of the ways you prove that something is hazardous, right, is after the fact, right? I slipped and fell on that. Well, all I'm telling you is how I think one of the ways you can prove that something is hazardous is to say, I slipped and fell on that ice, right? That's how I know it was hazardous, because I slipped and fell on it, right? And is that something that a lay person can say? Do you have to have an expert say that ice is slippery, right? Do you have to have an expert say that wet pavement is slippery, right? I don't think so, right? I think a lay person can say, I slipped because that was slippery, right? I think that's within the ability of a lay person to give that kind of opinion, right? There are some kinds of opinions that lay persons can give, right? And there are some kinds of opinions that lay persons can't give. I suppose, if you really wanted to dig into this, I suppose that in every case where there's a slip and fall, the petitioner's lawyer should hire a physicist to come in and prove the coefficient of friction of the surface on which the employee fell. I think that's extreme, right? Yes, Mark?
Dave, don't beat yourself to death. The more you talk about this, the more we believe you don't believe what you're saying.
Okay.
But I have to say this, ice is dangerous, period. End of story. I don't know what else you have to prove. More important in this case, I think, is the way the court's beating itself to death over the damn Walmart case.
Okay.
That stupid
Well,
case,
that
reasoning is nonsense. Why do they have to distinguish Walmart?
So let's talk about the Walmart case in just a minute. But before we talk about the Walmart case, I want to talk about the case that they didn't talk about in Sheriff Smith. The case that is not cited in Sheriff Smith, right, which is the Dukich case that we've talked about in here a lot, right, which is the slip was caused by wet pavement from rain as opposed to wet pavement from snow, right? And if you listen to the respondent's lawyer's argument in the appellate court here, he kept making that plea to the appellate court, right? How do you distinguish between rain that made the pavement wet or ice or snow that made the pavement wet and slippery, right? The pavement was slippery either way, right? Whether it was rainwater or ice water or snow or ice or a combination of all those things, right? The respondent lawyer said, is the real distinction here between it being 32 degrees and being 33 degrees? I mean, have we come to that, point here, right? And not only did the appellate court not buy that argument, they don't even cite the Dukich case in this decision. Not cited, right? Let's talk about the Walmart case, right? In the Walmart case, as you recall, that was not compensable, right? You remember the Walmart case was the employee leaving the Walmart. She's going to get in a friend's car, right? She's not going to her car. Her friend was going to pick her up. She's going to get in a friend's car. She gets on the parking lot, which presumably, let's presume for the sake of argument, was owned, maintained by the employer, by Walmart, right? Just to get that in the course of argument off the table, right? The appellate court says the distinction between Sheriff Smith and Walmart is that, and you take this for distinction or not, is that in Sheriff Smith was going to her car, whereas in Walmart, the petitioner was going to her friend's car, okay? I suppose that's a distinction. It's a distinction perhaps without a difference, as Mark Matrena said, appellate court, in case you're listening. So, anyway, I'm only kidding. So you look at how they distinguish Walmart in this Sheriff Smith decision, and you tell me if you think it's persuasive or not. Yes, John.
I would only add that to understand Walmart, you also understand the Morris Harvey case, because in Morris Harvey, the appellate court almost says they overrule their prior decision in Walmart. I think the House language is distinguished. So I don't know if we can jump straight from Walmart to the Sheriff Smith that same problem in North Harvey at the kids' Walmart, so they walked back to Walmart.
John Walker, as everybody knows, just said that Morris Harvey is a case that was relied on by the appellate court here in the Sheriff Smith case. For those of you who haven't seen it or haven't been exposed to it, John did a really deep dive on these parking lot cases for the Trial Lawyers Association last November. I highly recommend his materials to you because they are awesome. It's a history of he had cases from 1919 or something about, before they had parking lots, with a horse carriage parking lot, whatever it was. And so I highly recommend those written materials to you if you haven't seen them. All right, Marie, do you have So the question is, how do you reconcile Sheriff Smith with Dukich, right? How do you reconcile it? Everybody knows Dukich was my case, right? I represented the petitioner Dukich, so I don't think that I can be objective necessarily about this. I don't think they can be reconciled. My personal opinion is I don't think they can be reconciled, right? What difference does it make how the employer's premises became hazardous, right? What difference does it make? It makes no difference whatsoever how the employer's premises became hazardous. Now you can argue that pavement that is wet because of rain is not hazardous, I suppose. That might be the better argument. The problem is that when the commission and arbitrators engage in this risk greater than the general public, they've conceded that it's hazardous. They just said it's not more hazardous than what the general public faces, right? So, and that was the problem in Sheriff Smith too, right? In Sheriff Smith, the concession was, of course it's hazardous. It's just not more hazardous than what the general public faces, right? You conceded too much. Hazardous, right? So, anyway. All right, any other questions, concerns? Okay, good. Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate it.